Great. So welcome everyone, let's get started. I'm excited to be here with you all to discuss how to get smooth collaboration between founders and their teams. And I'm Rebecca, the communications wizard here at Round Sky Solutions. And first off, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our work, and I'll go ahead and share my screen so you all can have a visual. All right. So Round Sky is a worker-owned cooperative that works with leaders and aspiring leaders and organizations that value and want to improve their democratic and collaborative processes in their teams and hone in on their leadership potential. And we do that through courses, coaching, and team or company-based trainings grounded in our collaborative operating system and processes, which we call Collab. And you'll hear more about that throughout this webinar. And before I continue, we're co-hosting this webinar with Common Good Vermont, and Morgan will tell us a little bit about their work.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm Morgan. I'm the director at Common Good Vermont. So Common Good is Vermont's only statewide organization dedicated to uniting and strengthening all of our nonprofit organizations. We serve really as the go-to resource for peers to share resources, gain skills, and build partnerships. Through our work, we focus on increasing leadership, accountability, sustainability, and advocacy capacity all across the state. Strong leadership is an invaluable resource to the nonprofit sector and is why we are partnering with Round Sky Solutions to bring you today's webinar. And without further ado, I'll hand it back over.
Great. Thanks so much, Morgan. And before we continue on, I wanted to give us space to get to know who's on the call. And so if you could introduce yourselves, in the toolbar, you'll find the chat box. It's a little bubble, speaking bubble image, and click to everyone as the option and let us know your name, where you're coming from today, your location, and anything else you want to share. And you can go ahead and do that. You can start finding where that is. And you can see what other people are bringing. And you can see there that Morgan said, welcome everyone. So you might see a little notification to help you find it. And so we have Sasha coming from Volunteers in Medicine in Burlington, Vermont, and Kara from Lexington, Kentucky, working with the Kentucky Student Environmental Coalition, Zachary, based in Sydenham, London, in the UK, and Mia's coming here from DC. Welcome everyone, we're all over the place. I'm personally in California right now myself. And Marie from our Community Cares Camp, a summer food service and enrichment day camp, great.
And Marie is from Vermont.
From Vermont, awesome, welcome. A lot of Vermonters, of course, because that's where Round Sky Solutions is based, and so is Common Good. And David's coming from Cincinnati, Ohio, worked with several founders over the years, welcome. And Teresa's coming from the founder of Salvation Farms in Vermont, welcome. Zach is designing a co-produced therapy. Great, great, welcome. Glad that you could make it here. And keep introducing yourselves. Feel free to say hello to each other if you'd like. This is a group chat, so make it yours. And we'll keep going. So we'll introduce ourselves. So I'll pass this on to Morgan. Oh, you're muted, Morgan. Oops.
There we go. Thank you, Rebecca. So again, I'm the director at Common Good Vermont. We've been around for 8 years, and we serve the place of Vermont's nonprofit association. I've been with Common Good for about 2 years now, but I've been working and supporting our nonprofit sector here in Vermont for over 16 years in a variety of sectors and counties. I am a 7th generation Vermonter. I'm also the first with a 4-year degree from my family. And I also have a passion for supporting underserved populations and the nonprofits that assist them. I also love connecting people with resources and information, so please feel free to email me, contact me after this webinar if you have any questions about nonprofits at all. Thank you very much.
Great. Welcome, Morgan. Nice to hear about your background and your rich history in Vermont. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself now. So like I said, I'm Rebecca, the communications wizard here at Round Sky, and I've been working with these awesome folks for a year, a little bit over a year now. And what brought me to this work is the importance of process and structure to get us where we want to be. And I also wanted to enter more fully into the worker co-op movement to gain a better understanding of what economic justice looks like for me, as I come from a fragmented class background. And I currently live and have been in New Orleans for about 4 years. And I'm originally from California, which is where I'm at today, visiting family. And outside of Round Sky, I do anti-racist organizing with a collective in New Orleans and try to make time for dancing and traveling as often as I can. And I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today. Smooth collaboration in our teams with founders and everyone else has been on my mind for a while. So glad to be here today. And today's webinar will be led by Cecile Green, and I'll let her introduce herself to you all and tell us a bit more about what brought this topic up for her.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's a delight to be here with you. This topic is near and dear to my heart. And myself, a little bit about me. I'm one of the co-founders of Round Sky Solutions. We're a worker co-op and I live near Montpelier, Vermont. I've myself worked for founders and trained others in how to transition out of founder syndrome. Personally, I've founded more than one organization in my life and have participated in other startups where I was not the founder, but worked directly with founders. And I've seen founders, myself included, provide an invaluable service in birthing an organization. I've also seen the very same people undermine the success of their organizations. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but I was motivated by the common challenges between founders and teams that I experienced and took up a deep dive into organizational and individual development in search of a better way of working together. In particular, I was really curious what power is and developed some theories about power to map or explain the dynamics I commonly saw in organizations. I synthesized the research I did with my challenging career experiences, and from that research, I created a map of what organizations communicate about and a set of communication processes called collab that reliably deliver healthy forms of power in action, including much more fun, engaging, productive collaboration and smooth collaboration. So I published Collaboration That Works, a ruthlessly practical handbook for a generative world, as a training manual that summarizes this research and introduces collab for organizations. So as I said, delighted to be here with you and exploring ways of reliably getting this smooth collaboration between founders and their teams. And during today's webinar, you'll have a chance to examine some of the common issues that teams and founders face, including an understanding of founder syndrome, learn some tactics for dealing with founder syndrome and getting smooth collaboration as an employee, learn some tactics for smooth collaboration as a founder, and we'll wrap up with some next steps for you to consider for yourself and then a Q&A. So back to you, Rebecca.
Great, thanks, Cecile. And now moving to some logistics about this webinar. If you have any questions, you can type them in that same chat box that you used to introduce yourself. And I'll take clarifying questions as needed throughout the webinar. I'll try to respond to you as soon as I can. And we'll leave time at the end for the rest of your questions, more in-depth questions. And if you'd like to ask a question privately, you can choose to send it to Rebecca-Roundsky. You can see on at the bottom of my face there. To me personally, instead of the everyone function, if it's more private. And if you're having any technical issues, you can use that function as well. So not everyone gets bogged down with that if you can figure that out. And then this webinar is recorded and shared with you along with all the resources after this meeting. So just be aware of that. And I'll stop there, but before we launch into the content of the webinar, I wanted to invite those of you on the call to tell us what brought you to this webinar. And in particular, what's your experience with the collaboration between founders and their teams? Just, some first thoughts that come to your mind. And you can go ahead and put that in the chat box as well. And I'll start us off. I'll start us off with my own experience, which is at one of previous jobs working with a founder and a really small team in a nonprofit. One thing I noticed that was our meetings were particularly difficult because there wasn't a lot of communication that flowed back and forth, and not a lot of information that we could give. And it's not making as much sense as it does in my mind, but time after time, we just realized that our meetings were really unproductive, partially because they were taken over by the founder, and not anyone else had any room to give anything else. So there you go. I started off with that, and I'm sure you can do a lot more clearly than I can. Let's see. So the one thing that comes up is a fear of letting go. Definitely. What else comes up for you all? One person says that they smiled when they heard that founder syndrome was highlighted because they work with a lot of people with mental health disorders and have been realizing that some of the bad practices in mental health systems are everywhere in other workplaces. Absolutely. What else? What else is your experience? Doesn't have to be super clear. So this one comes from a founder, is that I'm not afraid of letting go, but I want others to start carrying part of the load, right? Redistributing that workload. Absolutely, that makes sense. Someone else is currently working at a nonprofit led by the founder, and collaboration is difficult. Expectations are not made clear up front. Processes for effective project management are not in place, and there is an expectation that staff will drop everything to respond to the founder's last-minute request. Yeah, that can definitely happen. I resonate with that.
And if folks want to stay confidential, please feel free. You can send me a direct message with your concerns or questions, and I will speak on your behalf without identifying who you are or your organization.
Great, thanks, Morgan. Yeah, you can send that to Morgan or myself, and we'll read that out for you. And keep them coming. And I'll read one more, and then we'll keep it going. Great. So one person said the board doesn't want to let go, but they don't want to step up either. The only way I can get them motivated is to threaten to resign so that they start to realize that they have responsibilities other than just showing up to meetings. That's heavy, and you're not alone, for sure. There's definitely a lot of people that are experiencing that. So like I said, feel free to keep sharing and commenting on each other's experiences, and we have a lot of territory to cover. So with that, I will pass it on to Cecile.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for those examples. They all resonate with me. And I thought it might be helpful to sort of start with a general definition of founder syndrome and go from there. So founder syndrome really refers to the challenges associated with organizations that have one or more few strong personalities in power, usually the individuals who started the organizations, but sometimes also applies to charismatic leaders or boards who have assumed power after an organization was formed. It's important to remember that founder syndrome is an organizational problem with causes stemming from both the founder and the followers, and that it essentially undermines an organization's ability to smoothly collaborate. We'll start by looking at the problem from the perspective of people who work with founders, and then move to looking at it from the perspective of the founder themselves. it's also important to keep in mind that founder syndrome can occur in any type of organizational legal structure, meaning that it can happen in nonprofits, cooperatives, corporations, collectives, civic organizations, organizations without any formal legal structure. So founder syndrome is more fundamental than legal structure, although legal structures can really hold it in place, or for that matter, undo it. So there's a lot of power in those legal structures, but they don't necessarily cause it in and of themselves. So really, founder syndrome refers to the influential powers and privileges that the founder exercises or that others attribute to the founder. The use of the word syndrome further suggests unhealthy organizational situations in which founders are more heavy-handed and indifferent about the imbalance of their control over organizations. And I just wanted to let you know that we'll be reading out these quotes for the benefit of those who are listening by audio only. So let's take a couple minutes to talk about symptoms. So some symptoms that founders and their teams struggle with in getting smooth collaboration include the following, but they're not limited to these. So decisions are made by the founder, often without input from others. The founder is deferred to in all matters, regardless of their actual expertise. Another one, the founder is the cornerstone of the organization's identity, and it makes it hard to move on without them. Another one, snap decisions and decision reversals are common without any explanation, warning, or consideration of the impact to others. And I heard that mentioned in the comments earlier. Also, information flow throughout the organization is stilted or even sometimes actively stifled, with the founder at the center of all information flows. And just another quick note, if you are dealing with a situation where it's largely a board, you can kind of substitute that term board as opposed to founder as you hear me speak. So another symptom, planning and courses of action, setting priorities are the purview of the founder. And they may or may not do any of that, and they may or may not make their thinking clear to the people who are working with them. Employees can often feel like they are not paid to think, but simply to deliver on orders, which themselves can change at the drop of a hat, undoing weeks of effort. If the organization has a board, that board can be filled by people who are loyal to the founder and not likely to countermand anything the founder has said or done. Another one, proposals for change coming from any direction other than the founder are expertly resisted and even actively discouraged. Founders usually have an inner circle of people that they trust, to whom implicit power is conferred through their proximity to the founder. So anyone want to add any further symptoms, please feel free that you've experienced into the chat box. I really appreciate what you've shared so far. And Rebecca, off to you for further symptoms.
Yeah, thanks for setting us up, just getting us on the same page of some of the things we're experiencing. And everyone feel free to share some other things that you've experienced. This is kind of getting the conversation going, so we're on the same page. And we have someone introducing themselves. They're working with a friend to start a group called Life on Earth, which has the outrageous goal of creating a more empowering and collaborative environment on the internet. Yeah, hope to avoid the pitfalls. Welcome. And if folks want to share their symptoms of poor collaboration or any collaboration that you've experienced. Someone shares, I read a problem in disability where a person has to be liked by the inner circle before they will get the benefits of the group. Absolutely. Yeah. There's, to go off of that, something that I've noticed is there is a sense of us versus them that happens when poor collaboration in your nonprofit, in your team, in whatever group you're working with. There's cliques happen is what they often call it in some circles, or silos, so that it can be really damaging for collaboration. Great, we have a good amount to set us up on. So let's keep going. Feel free as you think of them to add them to the group chat.
And just a quick reminder to make sure that you're all muted so we don't have any additional sound.
Thanks for the reminder. All right. And with that, I'll pass it back to Cecile.
Yeah, so thanks again for those examples. And I want to take a little time to sort of talk about some of the characteristics of founders who may be particularly susceptible to this. It doesn't happen to every founder, so just kind of use this as a metric, a meter for yourself, a barometer of where you are, where your experience lies. But often, founders are characterized, those that fall prey to founder syndromes are characterized by their charisma and sort of a love of shooting from the hip, and a concomitant distaste for structure and process, claiming it kind of cramps their style. A reluctance to cede meaningful power to others, also a tendency towards narcissism, and a desire to surround themselves with people who are loyal to them and prefer or are able to follow with little question. So it's really critical in these situations to hold in mind that the founder is just another person doing their best and are likely unaware about the extent to which their behavior is responsible for the conditions in their organization. They may also be unaware that the conditions are unhealthy because from their perspective, nothing may seem awry. However, demonizing the founder, even if they are clearly contributing to the toxic conditions, will not support a generative way forward. So I'd like to take a step back and offer my hypothesis on the fundamental power dynamics at play, which I've written in greater detail in academic articles and my book, Collaboration That Works. And essentially, if power is defined as the force of enactment, then founders are being given or are taking a disproportionate amount of power. When power is concentrated in any given individual, their brains literally change over time. And there's science behind this, reducing the neural pathways that foster empathy. Here's a quote, power, the research says, primes our brain to screen out peripheral information. In most situations, this provides a helpful efficiency boost. In social ones, unfortunately, it has the unfortunate side of making us more obtuse. So I'd like to emphasize that not every founder or charismatic leader will fall prey to these tendencies, but the percentage of leaders who develop these symptoms is very high, with huge impacts, huge negative impacts usually to daily work life for themselves and their team. Let me also underscore the role that those of us who, that we play, those of us who are supporting founders unconditionally by not holding them accountable and not giving them relevant and difficult feedback. So we too are implicated in this phenomena of founder syndrome by not directly working on the issues of poor collaboration in our teams that can have such a pervasive and corrosive effect on our work environments. So just to name a few of the consequences that we might be experiencing in our places of work, disempowerment and disengagement of employees, also increase in politicking to kind of get one's way, working ourselves behind the scenes, siloed teams, as Rebecca mentioned, bickering and bullying to ensure conformity, and higher than normal turnover. That's fairly common. Also expensive mistakes that are brushed off even if they were entirely avoidable. Systems and processes that support the founder's authority are implicitly maintained even if they create other problems and bottlenecks. Individuals that disagree with the founder are often eliminated or sidelined and silenced. And there's usually an inability to form meaningful connections between team members, or that's a challenge. Also an air of secrecy and fear where even talking to another team member regarding valid problems can be risky. So we're talking about a spectrum of challenges here, and hopefully you aren't as far along the toxic spectrum, but this represents the full spectrum. So also the founder often feels isolated and underappreciated and overworked for their sacrifices. And not many of us would really choose to work in such an environment if it were obvious going in, but we may unwittingly end up there, really. So are there other experiences that people would like to add to this list of consequences? Feel free to put them in the box there, and Rebecca, you can add them as we go. So I want to just keep rolling with the question of, once we find ourselves in a difficult situation with a founder, what do you do about it? And the first tip I would offer you is to evaluate your circumstance carefully. Sometimes the best course of action is to get out, and confronting a founder deeply enmeshed in founder syndrome can result in your being fired or demoted. And at the same time, confronting a founder before they are sort of too far along the line may be the best course of action. So my advice is this: evaluate the number of active symptoms and their severity. And if you can safely review your evaluation with another coworker, do so. To check your perception of the situation. If your conclusion is that the rating of the situation is moderate to severe and you're not willing or able to stick around with this harmful dynamic, I recommend you make your exit plan. The issue here is that once a founder is deeply enmeshed in these dynamics, their perception of themselves and their situation becomes skewed to support the primacy of their perspective. And any confrontation past that point can be experienced as a threat to the whole company, which should be summarily eliminated. So the founder is fused with their organization, and any critique becomes impossible. So on the other hand, if your rating of your situation is mild to moderate, consider the following tactics. First suggestion, identify what's not working in the organization from the founder's perspective. Pick the top 1 or 2 and set a time to meet with them privately to discuss your ideas about how to solve the problem. Meeting with them collectively can put them further on the defensive and thus less likely to hear what you have to say. Again, it depends on your situation. In that meeting, suggest some experiments as to how they might alleviate the problem. And I'll be listing some specific concrete solutions below to spark your imagination. Third thing to do is to settle on a plan in that meeting with the founder for moving forward, and plan to check in with them regularly to report on progress and find out how it's going from the founder's perspective. You can, of course, add yours, but again, I'm emphasizing the importance of doing this from the shoes of the founder. And once, step number 4 is once one of the problem areas is showing improvement, pick the next area and address that with an eye for continual improvement. Essentially, we want to make incremental, slow change. And some of the practices for you to consider. Alleviate your overworked founders. Often founders get to the point where they feel trapped in their roles and overworked. For this dilemma, I recommend helping the founder write down all the work they are concretely doing in the form of roles and the corresponding very specific accountabilities. From there, you can help the founder, or if you're the founder, help yourself identify which of these roles you would like most to be rid of, and suggest finding someone else in the organization who could take on these roles, or hire someone if that's an option. Another practice to consider, create effective collaborative meetings. So founders are often in a bottleneck, and a way of alleviating that is to get them out of facilitating meetings if they are doing so, and if they are not, get a facilitator in the meetings that is not the founder. Also make certain that there are meeting processes you choose have a clearly defined role for this facilitator and the scribe. So we know what the facilitator is doing, and we're clear about a scribe, essentially a note taker, what their power is in the meeting. Also, decisions, next actions, and other outputs determined in each meeting should be recorded in a transparent location for all team members. In addition, make sure that all members of the team can and know how to raise agenda items for the meeting. Perhaps the most important aspect of this is to give the power to the person raising the item for identifying which solutions will incrementally move their issue forward. And be sure those are consented to by the whole team, not just the founder, before being recorded in writing. Another practice is collaborative decision-making. This third experiment, you can consider instituting a clear collaborative decision-making process that is effective, consistent, and efficient. This process should include all the voices on the team in the decision-making process and not limit the decisions to the founder, though it should include a mechanism for integrating objections from any team member, including the founder. Essentially, objections are anything that would cause harm to the organization. So you want to get that from everyone on a team. Also note that your team should decide who can make which decisions without the consent of the team or the founder, which goes back to creating explicit roles with each person on the team. When you create explicit roles, you can confer the power to enact those roles when you make them. So that person holding that role has the authority to make decisions pertaining to that role without having to check back with the founder. A fourth suggestion I would like to offer you, which really only applies in situations where a founder is ready to retire, is to sell the organizations to the workers themselves. And this solution can take at least 9 months to several years to implement, so do be prepared to stick around in there for the long haul. So working to help an organization transition out of founder syndrome is sometimes thankless work, since if it's done well, the work you're doing may be invisible. However, the benefits you and the rest of your colleagues will experience far outweigh the lack of credit you may receive. And if you would like to receive more support for your particular situation, please reach out to us directly. We do offer free consultations, free initial consultations. So I'm just going to summarize the practices to consider before we move on to the perspective of the founder and what you can do as a founder to work with the situation. So first, alleviate your overworked founders, distribute their work. Effective collaborative meetings, those are really critical. Also, collaborative decision-making that's clear and explicit so that it's not just, okay, I think we kind of made a decision, or that's off to the founder to make a decision as the default. And the fourth is a transition to a worker-owned company. So before we transition into talking about founders, the issue from a founder's perspective, I wanted to invite any of you on the call to let us know via the chat box if you found other successful ways of working with founder syndrome, either for yourself as a founder or as being part of a team. So type anytime and Rebecca will read off some comments. And if you've got questions about your particular situation, happy to respond to those during the Q&A segment, which is coming up before long here.
Great. To answer Teresa, I will share the slides after this, but there it is real quick. And other folks can put in the chat box what are other solutions that you found that have been helpful to alleviating some of this not smooth collaboration and founder syndrome. And someone did mention something about creating a culture of the place where people are a part of the improvements of the organization, and they can bring up issues that they have at any time. So I think creating that culture is definitely a great solution. Another person offers up a resource to help think about this dilemma and identify what you can do to address it. The book is The E-Myth. Great. Thanks for sharing that. Feel free to say more if you'd like. And go ahead and keep putting ideas here for everyone. I think this is really important that we're learning from each other, and we'll keep going.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks everyone. I just wanted to take a moment and talk about the culture piece, because obviously it's pretty foundational. In my research and experience, the real question is, how do you do that? How do you actually create a culture different than the one you have? And what I've discovered and that we teach here at Round Sky is that one of the most important and accessible vehicles for doing that is your meetings, because you can create a structured set of meeting processes which allow you to raise tensions around your culture and get them incrementally processed through to an improvement, and use that as a vehicle for collectively aligning and deciding together on what does the new culture look like? How are we going to actually do that? Without a structure to improve your culture, it is impossible, if not very, very difficult to do so. So really having a meeting culture, meeting practice essentially, which enables you to take what's sort of implicitly functioning in an organization and make it explicitly work better is that mechanism. And it's very effective at doing that. So I want to take a step back and look at founder syndrome from the perspective of the founder. And again, just to remind you, I've been here myself. And the first thing to understand here is that as founders, we also suffer from founder syndrome. The fact that we might have more power does not equate necessarily to more well-being. We too may be trapped in our roles and feel a great deal of responsibility to the whole organization and not know what to do differently. So here are some of the symptoms that founders caught in founder syndrome may be experiencing. Being overworked with the sense that everyone is relying on you. Everyone comes to you with their questions, even if you don't have the answers for them. Another one, feeling isolated, alone, afraid that you'll let everyone down, and spending too much time in the weeds of the organization and not enough on the big picture. Decision fatigue, being the one to make all or many of the decisions in an organization can lead to exhaustion and reduce one's ability to actually make good decisions. A sense of being on a pedestal, and any attempt you make to come down off it can be met with hostility or suspicion. Also a feeling of being trapped, underappreciated, criticized, perhaps behind your back, while at the same time being adulated. It's a very surreal situation. So founder syndrome is not just caused by power-hungry narcissists that seek to dominate the organization. It's a bit of a caricature. Sometimes that can be the case, but much more often than not, founder syndrome is the byproduct of both the leaders and the followers. And many people just want a strong leader to rely on and shy away from responsibility, from stepping up, which is a comment I heard earlier in the webinar. They shy away from it, and they don't want the responsibility and pressure. They want to be able to leave their job at the office and go home carefree. Being a leader or holding a lot of responsibility can be challenging and painful, and if you are a leader that also cares, then it definitely goes home with you to wake you up in the middle of the night and give you unpleasant thoughts. So the pleasant side of being a founder can be hard to find, and it may seem nigh impossible to get out of the dilemma of your position short of walking away from the whole thing. So what actually can be done about this? And the good news is that there are some remarkably effective tactics that you as the founder can implement yourself and your organization to get you out of this syndrome. And you may recognize some of the similar sort of solutions from the perspective of the founder that we had for those working with founders. So there's a theme. First of all, use the power that you have as a founder to implement a collaborative operating system throughout your organization. Really the first, the most effective, the most far-reaching action you can take is to use the power you have to do this. Now, what do I mean by a collaborative operating system? It's essentially a set of communication skills for enabling shared power. So it has to do with the ways that people communicate around their work. Every organization already has an operating system, a communication operating system, but it's often implicit and not consciously structured to deliver the desired outcomes. So implementing a collaborative operating system will enable you to distribute the power you currently hold as a founder to others in your organization and have them hold each other accountable, thus taking you out of the bottleneck you are currently in. So distributing power to others doesn't mean that you lose control over everything that's happening. It doesn't mean that you're letting go. It means that, and those things would be scary indeed, and certainly inadvisable in certain circumstances. So any transition like this must be given the time it needs to happen incrementally with checks and balances. So if you're curious about organizational operating systems, please do check out CoLab. It's a researched, synthesized, and tested collaborative communication operating system. So one of the benefits of a collaborative operating system is that it will enable you and the organization to collectively revisit and clarify as needed the following things. Your purpose, which is your vision, your mission, and your values. The business model, which is all about the value exchange, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, doesn't matter, everyone has a business model. Strategy, which is all about your priorities, and governance, which is about shared agreements. And so all of these are critical to being able to operate collaboratively. And as you begin to create these with your team, the power you hold as founder will begin to safely and incrementally transfer to the whole organization without your losing control of what the purpose is, because your voice is included in that process. In addition, a comprehensive operating system will also include professional and personal development for everyone on the staff, which will give you, as the founder, support for your own growing edges, and also give you an explicit mechanism for ensuring your staff is developing in line with the organizational leadership needs that you see are needed. So another important action to take is to clarify your decision-making process, including who has the authority to make what decisions without you. So creating an organization-wide standard for decision-making can be liberating for both founder and employees. However, it's critical to choose one that can reliably work. There are a lot of decision-making models out there, and you may choose to use more than one, as we actually recommend in Collab, but it's important that the entire organization understand when which type of decision-making should be used. So we also highly recommend a collaborative decision-making process like integrative consent, which we'll be sending out a link to in at least a little cheat sheet, flow sheet for it in our follow-up email. But there's some important benefits that come from rapidly including the perspectives of the people who are impacted by a decision. So moving on to the next possible solution, make your power and the power of others explicit by clarifying the roles that you are holding and determine which ones you would like to pass on. So by going through this official explicitly passing off of authority to make decisions regarding those roles is profoundly liberating for you as a founder. This part can also get a little tricky if you as the founder are unwilling or unable to confer the authority with those roles and relinquish your right to kind of micromanage the work. It doesn't mean that you must give up control of quality or priorities. In fact, you actually gain more control by using a team-based priority setting process and inviting the team members to contribute to the creation of policies that cross-check work in line with explicit standards. If you find you are in a position to have to also train the individuals filling new roles, that's common, I suggest creating a trainer position for yourself as the founder that is temporary, but that also has the authority to pass on how things have worked in the past, with the understanding that this new individual may choose to do things differently. And as long as that isn't causing harm to the organization, you agree to step back and let them have the autonomy to deliver on that role as best they see fit. We'll also send a step-by-step process for role generation in the follow-up email. Clarifying all the roles in an organization will also set you up to onboard new people and more easily transition yourself as a founder out of the organization into roles that are a better fit for you. So this step also really sets you up to do succession planning, which is essential if you want to consider the long-term health of your organization. Another potential solution is to set up a collaborative accountability system and reduce the number of hours you spend in one-on-one meetings with your direct reports. So one of the most effective ways of getting yourself more time and increase the capacity of your team is to reduce the number of one-on-one meetings you hold. Instead, institute a team-based, rapid-fire collaborative accountability system, which includes a transparent location for project and task tracking. This tracking system can be virtual or physical, depends on the needs of your team. The key here is to make reporting back on target projects part of a regular meeting process, followed by an opportunity for questions, comments, and appreciations on those projects. Now keep in mind that you as a founder holding projects will also be included in this accountability process, which can be tremendously liberating for you and your team. Any detailed discussion of an item during this reporting out time should be saved for the main agenda segment of the meeting. This process will enable the whole team to be much more in sync and informed, and reducing the amount of information that has to flow through you in order for the organization to function well. Another solution is to explicitly encourage others to build the agenda during your meetings. In addition to explicitly asking others to participate in building this agenda, make sure that you have a facilitator that's not you, and an effective process for ensuring that the outcome of the agenda item that's being moved forward is by the person who raised that issue. Over time, this practice will build the shared leadership capacity of your team. And this will also institute a mechanism for continuous improvement in the organization that's independent of your perceptions, but without diverging from what you know as a founder would cause harm to the organization. So it kind of opens the door to the whole team to lead. So let's do a quick summary of the solutions for a founder. Use the power you currently have to implement a collaborative operating system throughout your organization, which can stand the test of time, persist in any number of role changes, including your transition out of the organization. Clarify your decision-making process, including who has the authority to make what decisions without you. Also, make your power and the power of others explicit, and set up a collaborative accountability system and reduce that number of one-on-one meetings with your direct reports. And build the agenda with others. And you can do this very concretely by going in around and asking every person of the team to contribute what's on their mind for this meeting. And the key thing with that is to do this practice for weeks or months, because it takes time for people to learn how to raise their tensions and to trust that it's safe to do so, and that the process will hold them even if the item is contentious. So I would like to see here if there's anything else you want to share with the rest of us on the call. Again, please use that chat box. And Rebecca will check in with us if there's anything that makes sense to share at this minute. So these are the top level suggestions I've seen for preventing and transitioning out of founder syndrome. And I really encourage you to give them a try. Though I will offer a caveat that having expert facilitation through a transition out of founder syndrome can be extremely helpful, if not necessary, for navigating the details of your situation. This can be extremely emotional, and having a third party that's trained and can support you through that is critical. So we have more resources to support your journey, which Rebecca will tell you more about. And in the meantime, while leveraging the learning that comes out of true collaboration, it's really a lifelong process. And using reliable practices for getting there makes the whole thing a whole lot easier. And I'd like to just take a few minutes to tell you about an opportunity that we have for our online course, our Level 1 Collaborative Leadership Certification Program, which is designed to help you integrate these kinds of tools and embody shared facilitative leadership. So in this intensive remote learning experience, you really learn about how to use Collab in a way that taps into your brilliance, your own leadership, and implement smooth collaborative practices in your teams. This course also builds up your skills and increases your confidence in your ability to facilitate your team's growth, vision, and conflict resolution. So it provides you with the necessary skills and practices to communicate effectively within your team. And I'm going to pass it to Rebecca now, who will share just a little bit more.
Great. Thanks so much, Cecile. And I'm going to talk about just this program a little bit more in depth so that you can get an understanding if what the program offers is for you and if it will meet your needs as a leader in your organization, whether you're an acknowledged leader or not. And then afterwards, we'll take questions. So first things first, it has 5 modules, and the first one is grounding in the why and what of collaborative leadership. So you'll add this to your tool. You'll add this to your tool belt. Effective processes for knowing what you and your team need in any situation, and also how to get there. So there's something specific about knowing what you need, and then how to move that forward as we go into all these different types of challenges. And you'll get lots of tools and skills for facilitating those productive meetings and really creating that culture that we're talking about, that culture of collaboration. And then in the next module, we'll get into accountability. I think accountability is a really important thing in our teams, especially as we start putting more emphasis on the people that are in them to do their work rather than telling them what to do necessarily, so self-managed. And so you'll learn how to utilize an openness and transparent team system that really builds trust. And you'll have your own project of task tracking for yourself and also know how to do it collectively, a collective task tracking system. And then the next module is all about facilitation, which is super important in our teams. Knowing how to facilitate through all the conflict that happens that's inevitable in our teams, including managing difficult people or difficult moments with people, working with the power of that conflict and communicating with clarity, and understanding how to integrate multiple perspectives as we're shifting to a team that is more collaborative and maybe, dare I say, more empowered to work together. And so we'll be doing that through dialogue about what that means and practice and feedback from the coaches and your peers. It's a small, intimate cohort of learners. And then 2 more modules. Click. Okay. The next one is practicing and refining your facilitative leadership skills. And here we really want to hone in on the skills that you're learning and that you have learned in the past. And answering any of those questions that come up as you're implementing this stuff in your team, if this is the course for you. And we'll be practicing ways to manage unhealthy power dynamics in the moment as well in this part. And then it's really important to us that people are successful. So we'll create a clear plan about how to move forward and to integrate and embody these new skills. So there is a whole section on that and getting lots of tools to know what's next for you. And then I'll quickly go into some of the results here and other things that are happening. And then again, we'll do questions and answers afterward. So through this intensive remote learning program, which you can register for right now if you like, we're doing a rolling application basis. I will review some of the benefits. So you'll be able to piece together all you've learned about healthy, powerful leadership in the past and through this program to see real and sustained progress in your personal development. So not only what you learn in the course, but also implementing all the other things that you've learned. We're sure that it's possible that you've done a personal development thing in the past. So it's important to be able to combine that with what you're learning instead of that you learn this here and there and there. And then another thing that's really important to us is how to engage your values of your life and work commitments, really connecting those two things, which can often be different. And then we'll talk about how to harness the power of distributed agile governance to make sustainable and crucial changes. So how to, as we're living in a world that changes from moment to moment with technology and ideas, you want to be able to do that for yourself and for your teams. And then we really got into the importance of collaborative decision making in this call. And you'll learn just how to do that and how to work through all the tricky situations that happen when you're doing that with your team. And facilitating, as I said before, you will be able to facilitate productive meetings with clear outcomes, which is one of the main ways that our teams work together and communicate to get the work done. So that's important. And you'll be getting workable and effective accountability tools. And you'll use these skills over and over and over again in all kinds of contexts. And I can definitely speak to that for myself, using some of these skills even in my family visits, which is kind of silly and fun, but also really meaningful for me to be able to use this in many ways. And so just to take a step back, some of the other things included in this course are the instructional manual and card deck of how to use these collaborative practices, access to our online course, an intimate cohort of folks that are like-minded and that you'll grow with, and very personalized feedback from the coaches. and lots of love. So we'd love to see you there. If you have any questions about that, or if this is the right next step for you, please feel free to reach out to me, and you can go to that link as well. And if you're in Vermont, you could be eligible for a full scholarship through VSAT grants. And if you're not in Vermont or you're not eligible, we have plenty of scholarships and other payment plans. So if that is a cost for you. And with that, let's go into our Q&A. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. And I want to start the Q&A with a question that came up in the comments, which was pretty specific. Cecile, how does this transition to worker-owned co-ops or companies look for nonprofit businesses? What's your experience been with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, I have not had personal experience transitioning a nonprofit to a worker co-op, but I know that it can happen, and there's plenty of other resources that we can point you to if you'd like. But the basics are that it requires obviously consent from your board and the rest of the organization to make such a transition, and then it's really a simple matter of your legal paperwork being transitioned and having a set of bylaws that operate essentially in a worker cooperative context. At least in Vermont, and I don't know if this is true in other states across the union. The worker cooperatives are essentially considered a form of nonprofit here in the state. So they're highly aligned in the way that profits are managed and dealt with. It's really a lot about getting the consent and then switching your legal structure, and it's ultimately not that complicated. Yeah.
There's also information on the Vermont Secretary of State's website, which is secstate.vt.us. If you're a nonprofit in Vermont and you'd like to check the status of your nonprofit or alter the status of your nonprofit to change from a 501c3 to a co-op or something else.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Morgan.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of transitioning in the legal way, there's that, but there's also just transitioning your culture to a collaborative operating culture, right? And we have worked with nonprofits that are operating on this collaborative operating structure. So I think that's one of the first steps, is seeing, does this actually work for the culture of your team? And then getting into the legal stuff. Yeah. Right. So I'm not sure exactly where your question was coming from for that, but you have multiple options there. And another question that has come in is, I would like to discuss how a paid staff member deals with a volunteer board who are not only the staff member supervisor, but who are not upholding the mission statement of the organization, and in some ways potentially harming clients in the process. Can you speak to that, Cecile? Yeah, and that's that's both very tricky and fairly common. So I just wanted to say it's a hard situation. And there's several things I want to sort of recommend to you. First of all, it sounds like the mission or the purpose of the organization, there isn't alignment between the board and the staff that are doing the work. And that might be the first place to revisit. What's your mission statement? And are you all on the same page? If not, update it, upgrade it. But that alignment is critical, because without that alignment, then people are easily just going to be operating in different paradigms, essentially, in terms of what's helpful and what's not. Second thing is that I would take some time to get the role of the board and the role of the staff very clear, explicit, and adapted to your situation. So if it's not working right now, then raise that tension and get it, use it to identify new roles for your staff and your board, or an amended, adapted version of them, so that the harm that's currently happening is no longer happening. And that may, again, take some incremental change. So keep that in mind as you go through this.
But having that explicit conversation about what is the power of the board and what's the power of the staff and around what's not currently working.
Great, thanks. And if there are any follow-up questions from that, feel free to add them in. And we have another question here. Is, can someone share ideal passing of torch? How can it go natural evolution of inspiring a group to take over what may have started as one person's vision, or any example of curing a founder's syndrome situation? So how can the natural evolution of a group to take over the mission versus one person? Well,
yeah, absolutely. And so the process that I'd encourage you to go through is to take the time to articulate what the purpose of this organization is with your team members, giving them the same weight as you as the founder would have in terms of their input into that decision. And integrative consent offers you a fantastic model for doing that. And it's an improvement over consensus in the sense that consensus can get really bogged down in personality difficulties. Integrative consent sort of bypasses that and allows you to integrate different perspectives. But then you have a purpose that is now shared by your whole team as opposed to just one that you as the founder came up with. However great it was initially, if you're really looking to pass the torch, start there, pass the purpose. And that really means create a new, potentially, and upgraded purpose with the input of your team. Next, I recommend actually doing that same process with your business model, whatever your revenue streams are, whether they're from, grants and foundation money or from selling products, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, but you have a model. Go through the same process with your team with that model. How is money coming in? How are our expenses going out? And have consent around that. So you're passing off the guts essentially of the organization to your team members and empowering them to make decisions about that model. That process, again, please take your time with it. There's a lot of education that can go into bringing a staff up to speed on financials. Very, very, very much worth the effort. That's a critical piece of passing the torch well. Third, your priorities or your strategy. So I use strategy to refer to the various sets of priorities that an organization has. And frankly, there's a lot of nested priorities in an organization from the biggest level to the smallest team. So going through a process of identifying priorities as a team, that again sort of passes the torch of what's important to your team members so that they not only have a voice, but they most importantly have a process for continually, clarifying what these priorities are, because it's never a one-stop deal. And I recommend going through that same process of collectively clarifying your policies, your roles, your protocols, any shared agreements you have about who has authority over what. Make that something that the team is reviewing and updating if any updating needs to happen through integrative consent. And similarly with the projects that you're enacting, building out a collaborative accountability system will enable your team to literally take up that management role of, hey, something's happening, something's not happening. What do we do with this new thing that's coming on our plate? They will have a system and a process for doing that within. So those are some suggestions for safely passing the torch. And the biggest thing is, get those practices in place and so that your team knows what to do and how to do it.
Great. Thanks, Cecile. That's really a lot of helpful information. I'm hoping it seems helpful to me. And we're a little bit over time here. So if you have any other questions or comments that you'd like to share with us, feel free to reach out. Here are our emails. Cecile@roundskysolutions.com, Rebecca@roundskysolutions.com, and director@commongoodvermont.org. Feel free to reach out to any of us. And I'll send a follow-up email to you all with the recording of this, as well as a slideshow and a bunch of resources sometime this week. as soon as it's all ready. And thanks so much. Feel free to open your mics and say goodbye if you'd like, and whatever else.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
It's great
you.
to be here with you. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Great material.
Have a great day, everyone.
Come visit. Arc 38. I'll say, come visit. We love you. Good work.
I was just up in Vermont for like 6 months.
Nice.
Yeah, Collier's a great place.
Great.
We are a little biased. We do love it too.
Nice. Bye, everyone.